Dr. Shyam Sharma, editor of the Journal of Multidisciplinary Perspective in Higher Education. He will talk in a few minutes. This is also open access journal.
On the issue of becoming editors and co-editors of professional journals and academic books, one of the bigger, broader motivation for me in terms of my own professional growth, but also my ability and desire to share a little bit, give back to the community that has given me an education and opportunities for career and success, is to think about writing and publication as a social mission, as a social cause. And that the reason I bring that up instead of simply offering pragmatic tips is because without that deeper vision, mission, I think the work that we do today has become increasingly misaligned with what got many of us into academia in the first place. We want to educate others. We want to address social problems and issues. We want to enlighten the next generation and inspire and motivate the next generation. And scholarship oftentimes becomes sort of dissociated with that general interest to do social good, because the metrics and the indexes, the cost structures and the platforms and the technologies and even the traditional modes of peer review and gatekeeping can actually misalign with, especially with the vision and mission of those of us working in public institutions, institutions serving minority population, institution with a social vision and mission. And so I want to align those two things together, and I want to bring best of the both worlds, as I call it, by looking at how, on the one extreme, that deeper motivation, that higher calling can become roiled up in confused and tangled in this regimes of really dry, meaningless bean counting kinds of systems that are often corporate, privatized. Not all corporate and privatized things are bad, but in corporate privatized in bad ways. They don't seem to allow that ecology of knowledge making that is dominated by the paywalls and the gatekeepers and the profit makers and the middlemen. Can be really discouraging for us to contribute. But I don't want to paint a black and white picture here. But scholars do want to be agents of change. Scholars want their agency and their creativity to drive the process and the product and the application of scholarship and knowledge making. Scholars do want to connect with people, connect people together across borders, and to make an impact on society. That is the ecology of knowledge making that we want, right? But then this could quickly sound like an idealistic extreme for those of us who actually have to grapple with the challenges of process and materials, resources, and platforms, find reviewers and sustain systems. On the other hand, the idea of sustainability may look like, at first, it has to be based on some sort of payment system in order to publish. Then you could take it a step further and not realize that it creates a lot of problems. For example, what happens when someone pays to publish? How do they maintain quality and rigor? How do they even maintain ethics and responsibility, accountability to society? I have to pay to publish because I get a professional development benefit from that payment, from that publication. And the industry gets to use my paid research in order to make money. I pay them for them to make money. Oftentimes it goes too far. But then that landscape is also very encouraging for these other players that come in because they want to push predatory journals. They want to put on a facade of equality and rigor and even accountability, but it's just a facade, right? And they want to call it open source. It's not really open source. Open source means something different from what we see. And they want to charge the readers and the author and then institutions and sell the same chicken 3 times. And that's ugly. That ugly landscape, it can be visible in the global global south, where unlike in the global north, Western Europe and Northern America, these markets of research scholarship publication in South Asia, for example, in the African continent, in South America, in East Asia, that are really dangerously fraught in that scholars are being asked by their institutions to produce scholarship. They don't have any roots in the local society or profession or history or economy or politics or anything. They are in English that the local population cannot read. They are supposedly in international journals, but they could be predatory or pay to publish industry, and that is producing nothing of value to the society that pays for those scholars to do work. And that ugliness can be actually, when we come back and look at our own landscape here in the global north, we see, aha, that's actually happening here too, the ugliness, right? We cannot allow that to take over the scholar's agency and desire to contribute and autonomy and a desire to make an impact. So we can't really ignore that dynamic, but it's not either or. It's not extreme idealism and extreme pragmatism that is corrupt. I think we are able to bring the best of both worlds together, and this sounds a little glib, might, but I'm thinking of the Open Journal in Education, the OJED network, the network run by Krishna Bista, Christopher Glass, Uttam Gauli, along with in connection with Star Scholars Network. These set of journals are actually sustained by a few entrepreneurial academics like Bista, Glass, and Gauli, and other scholars who are running the systems behind the non-profit, community-minded, scholarly, community-driven processes, right? So these but that's only one model that I've seen. I've seen other models in South America. I've seen other models in South Asia. There must be others in other parts of the world. We simply should not give up and either become too realistic and give in to the corrupt models of cannibalizing academic work for economic interests, or become so idealistic that we don't set these systems up. There are sponsorships, there are revenue generation models, there are collaboration, there are all kinds of investment systems that create these platforms so the rest of us who are not really good at maintaining the system are able to provide quality and rigor. So it's a collaboration, it's a network, it's an ecology. And I do want to bring up the point of ecology because ecologies have certain features like axis. They have certain interdependencies, interconnections. I would even say human ecological systems have value systems that sustain the ecology. And then they are aligned with our service mission. They, for example, scholars are able to contribute a little bit of their scholarship to that larger, broader social mission in order to, pitch in and collaboratively contribute and co-construct knowledge in the process. And that commitment to the public and the larger world, it is that commitment that is going to create value. And that commitment can and is be made possible. It is possible already if you really are driven by this larger purpose to begin with, rather than thinking in binary terms, rather than giving up, becoming depressed and frustrated, or just being angry and unhappy about the what is wrong. So there's so much that is right. If we look at the people that are working, please join us. Let us work together. Let us maintain systems that are diverse, rather than letting this one extreme or another just dominate the conversation, or more importantly, practice.
There is a tension between this pragmatic worldview. There's article processing charge. What a fancy phrase. for doing things that most of us don't like. And an idealistic world where we would like to have the scholarly agency and creativity and our direct social impact without these middlemen, standing between us with their paywalls and gatekeeping and all kinds of shenanigans. But in recent years, I have also become a little optimistic about the possibilities, because the ecology, due to technological evolution, due to global networking among scholars, due to the commitment and persistence of many scholars like Dr. Bista and other colleagues who run these platforms, by finding resources and sponsorship and support, and by pooling together talent and resource from around the world, by supporting mentoring. So I see that alternative ecologies can also thrive. And what I would like to urge any emerging scholars in this landscape is you can get the best of both worlds if you are committed and passionate about it. On the one hand, you can be a little entrepreneurial and find resources and platforms and support if you band together and seek these kinds of resources. On the other hand, you don't need to give up to these predatory journals or even payment-based journals. I have serious doubt that these payment-based journals can have quality and rigor and ethics and social values, socially driven mission behind them. Because what happens when somebody gives someone $200 to publish an article? They're not likely to process the article in the same way that they would process the article, right? And so let us not be frustrated by the corrupt and negative and side of this business, of this landscape, and let us be driven by that deeper passion, and we will be able to find both a broader value to do the work that we do to contribute to society, and also do it in a way that is sustainable and feasible, and that taps into the talent and passion of a network of scholars like this one. Heard that oftentimes when you reach out to a journal that is otherwise good, but also charges an APC, article processing charge, and to say that your salary is not at a scale that you can afford that kind of money to pay in dollar amount. I know that they waive these fees sometimes, but if they will neither waive this fee, nor is it within your comfortable range, don't publish with them. Find something. In fact, I would take it a step further, and I would say that push back against the neoliberal machine in your local university and your local system that pushes you into the laps of these people that are undermining the mission of scholarship by doing this pay to play business. Push back. Maybe start a journal that is of high quality, and work with your academic administrators and policymakers and say, will you value the work that we're doing here, or would you simply push us to the pay to play international business? I think it is not either or, again, as that was my broader message earlier. It is not so either or. We have tremendous leverage if we are passionate and connected. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. Dr. Suburn and Dr. Jeffroyd, any comment, any, that question earlier was for you in your journals. Do you get those questions from the authors?
Yes.
How do you
I do support Dr. Sharma's views regarding the pushback against against paying the APC, but I think it's unfortunate that with some of the larger publications, like the ones from Sage Open, where there's very little negotiation in terms of paying the fee, the APC seems to be set per journal, and it's what authors are asked to pay. I do understand your point of view, though, and I do believe as well there are other ways in which we can be published. And it is unfortunate that so many of the larger publishers are now charging an APC, and it can sometimes run into hundreds of dollars. So totally get what you're saying, but I also know that it's sometimes non-negotiable with some platforms.
We shouldn't let them sell the same chicken 3 times. That's what they're doing.
Jeff, any comment?
So I think ultimately the journal is interested in publishing work. I mean, so when I look at the journal, the review process goes through, and we talk about, and the review is done with respect to the contributions of the manuscript. And then if it is accepted, then there's the question of how we would meet the article processing charge. I think most times the journals would like to publish the article if the author is unable to pay for it. I think the key thing is, what is the case the author is making for why the payment is a problem, why an exception should be granted. The challenge when the person says, I work in this community, this country, and the salaries of the teachers are X, and I would like an exception, in other words, not to pay the article processing charge. If an exception is made for a person, that person in the country, then the question is, well, why don't I make that exception for everybody in that, every faculty member in that country? And so the question really is, what's the case for being able to either have no charge or a reduced charge? And I think that the author needs to be clear about why an exception should be granted. So the journals that I've worked with are very interested in publishing the work that and if it's already been accepted, they would really like to publish the work. It's just a question that they also are running a business.
Yeah.
And that brings, as Dr. Sharma said earlier, that brings some constraints along with it. And, but Dr. Sharma is concealing something, not intentionally, but ultimately the operation costs money.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
And, it's a question of where the finances come from. If
gonna,
you find a donor that is willing to support it,
Yep.
That's great, but then the donor may have some of their own interest attached to it.
Yes, Jeff, that was my next question here too. The question going other way, Sage charge 1,200 and then your journal charge 1,690. And the question for the Dr. Kim and Dr. Brooksy, how do you do operation of the journal? Yeah, yes, it's cost a lot of money in the production of the journal.
Well, for higher education, politics, and economics, we're part of the Open Journal Education Database, OJED. So you saw that in a lot of the URLs that we shared. That is for JSARD and for the Journal of Trauma Studies as well. And because of generous donations from universities, we are able to do this for free for the authors. We don't get paid either. So this is a volunteer piece for us as well. So it's the universities that are helping us with this charge, and we don't have to charge other people to do that. So I think we're lucky for that.
The cost has to come from somewhere. I guess we should not lump every paid journal in the same way. There are many varieties of them. What I was trying to say, that there's so many different possibilities that scholars should not paint the picture in black and white. And Dr. Freud, I was trying to get at what you said, that cost has to come from somewhere, right? Nothing is free. There's no such thing as free. However, I think we should see different possibilities as scholars. I think we should, as scholars, even if there's a little higher indexing or whatever attachment to a journal that you have to pay your 5 months of salary, don't do that. You have a responsibility towards the next generation, because nobody is able to pay. You may be able to pay because you've got a federal funding. You may be able to pay because you are more privileged, but be careful about the landscape. Would you want anybody to pay 5 months worth of salary to publish an article in North America, in Europe? You wouldn't. And that means we should feel morally, ethically responsible, socially responsible to make sure that the landscape is more diverse, the ecology is richer, that we don't fall into these impossible trends. Because when a trend becomes, acceptable widely, people just go with it. Scholars are vulnerable people too. If there's no other option, we do. Look at adjunct faculty, because the market of supply and demand, right? Look at people that are exploited and abused in the developing world today. They are faculty members, but they teach. One of my colleagues teaches 5 classes, 4 terms with 45 students per class, and she is asked to publish in international journals with high indexes. And then we should really understand that entire landscape if you're talking scholarship about produced by them. And I think we really need to diversify and complexify our understanding, and not simply say, oh, what can we do? Or simply, oh, they're evil. Or simply, no, we should not be doing anything. There's a lot of latitude here.